gentlemen.
Uh-oh.
It's time for the Early Bird Special. Bringing you the best stories from the world of sports and sports entertainment. Now, here are your hosts, Sparky and Burdick.
Here, betrayed me. It's falling for a second then. Welcome back. This is the Early Bird Special. And throughout this week, we've already told you guys, we're going to give you a breakdown of each NFL division. We're going to start with, well, we started yesterday with the AFC NFC Wests, which obviously we're not really a big surprise to anybody. I think we're pretty close to what it was last season, outside of the Rams taking the NFC West in the handed fashion. I believe they will. But today we're going to handle the north side of things, starting with the AFC North. And arguably, in my opinion, while doing my notes yesterday, I feel like these divisions are probably going to be the most competitive next year on both sides. I think both of these divisions are just ridiculously hard to win. You got the Ravens, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Browns, obviously, in the AFC. The Lions, the Bears, the Vikings, and the Packers, oh my, in the NFC. However, let's start with the top of the AFC North, which I think we're probably both in the same boat here. Baltimore Ravens.
Yep.
Personally, I have them about 14-plus wins with an easy walk to at least the top two teams in the AFC. Not necessarily giving them the one seed just yet, but it's definitely going to be hard to take that away from them. On paper, easily the most stacked team in in NFL this year. And they did everything possible to address their woes last year in the pass game on the defensive side. They brought in Yair Alexander. They brought in Awaze as well to be the third corner. You made strides in terms of the draft. You found a good second safety to put out there next to Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks. You got a edge rushing just monster and Mike Green at a Marshall, who I think, although, yes, had trouble off the field in between his college and now pro days, I think that's all going to wash away. We're going to see a great edge rusher for the Baltimore Ravens for the foreseeable future. And to be honest with you, when I look at everybody else in this division, I said they're going to be competitive, and they are going to be competitive. You look at the Steelers and the Bengals, as much as we love to talk about all the woes we've heard from them this offseason, they're still going to be competitive in playoff teams, more than likely. But I don't know if any other team is as prepared to take on this offense and defense in Baltimore that also brought in DeAndre Hopkins as well to be arguably the number one pass catcher for the team.
I was going to pretty much say the same thing. Plus, you have a Derrick Henry. You have some players that, have a year under the belt with this offense. I think this team is just stacked. And I think, Lamar Jackson, the Zay Flowers, you mentioned Hopkins, plus the defense is going to be stacked. I think it's Ravens. I'm not going to jump the gun and say they're Super Bowl, but I will say the same thing. I think they're a top two team in the AFC, and I'd be surprised if they didn't run away with this division early.
Honestly, they were number one in offensive yards and rush yards last year, second and third down percentage, seventh in pass yards. Now that you brought in a pure wide receiver that can catch in DeAndre Hopkins, I expect you to go up in those numbers as well. Probably jump into the top 5 in pass yards. That's just offensively. And honestly, the worst of their team last year was probably the secondary and their ability to stop people on third downs, where they were 20th in the NFL. That's going to change. I think people like Yair Alexander are going to come in and absolutely tear it up. I know he had a rough year last year with the Packers, but the Packers still look great in the secondary last year. We'll get to that on the other side of this conversation. And I just feel like they've made the proper steps forward to just make themselves a Super Bowl contender, even more so than they were last year. And we were talking about them being potentially the best team in football last year. So without skipping a beat, I think Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens easily run away with the AFC North with 14-plus wins. And I say easily with very, very light intentions here because, again, I still expect teams like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati to at least beat them once. And that's saying something. Pittsburgh is up in the air. Cincinnati, if you have the offense to at least make it happen. Let's move to number 2, though, my friend. I have the Steelers in the second place spot. Where are you?
Me too. This one could be way off or right on base. I think it's a very, very different roster from last season. And I still give this team, a couple wins just because of their tough defense. If it wasn't that they brought back or re-signed Watt to his contract extension, I'd be having a different conversation. But if you look at the team, not only Cam Hayward and Watt, but Patrick Queen, Darius Slay, Joey Porter Jr., Ramsey, you could go down the list. I think the Steelers' defense is going to be a top 10 defense like always. And my question is still going to be on Aaron Rodgers and how quick this offense can pick up. And really at the running back position or the receiver position, aside from DK, if he can get out of his own head, he could have a hell of a year, or this could all be a failed experiment.
Honestly, it really could. The offseason didn't go exactly as you planned, right? I mean, I think the Steelers' original plan coming into this offseason was sign Justin Fields to a long-term contract, figure out how you can get him a secondary weapon. Possibly the DK Metcalf trade still happens, but I think that the route you went with the Steelers would have looked way differently if you had Justin Fields rather than Aaron Rodgers, right? And at this point, I agree with you. I think next year we're looking at a top 10 defense from the Steelers, as we do dang near every year. And it's because of their ability to create turnovers. They were in the top 10 in almost every statistical category last year in turnovers. The only thing that they struggled at was the secondary, much like the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, they allowed 66% of their completions to their opponent, which was 20th in the league, and honestly, were 23rd in yards given up as well from the air. So when you go out and you pick up guys like Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey, obviously you had that specific thing in mind that you need to fix. The only thing that I am now worried about is that your safeties are a little bit, I won't say soft, but they're definitely just up in the air. I don't know exactly how talented your safeties are going to be this year without Fitzpatrick. But when you have a front seven that you have there with TJ Watt and everybody else, I mean, all you need is TJ realistically, but you also have Cam Hayward, you have Highsmith. I mean, the entire team is going to be stacked. Patrick Queen is a linebacker that can probably fly faster than any DB you have on the roster. And you've already mentioned Joey Porter Jr. is an up-and-coming corner that is just going to excel with 2 veteran, just absolute Hall of Famers in Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey playing right next to him. So I'm very excited to see what we see on the defensive side. The offensive side is where my curiosity is here, because you have Arthur Smith as your offensive coordinator. And I'm going to tell you right now, him being a former head coach in Atlanta, I know the offense that this guy runs, and I'm not sure if it's an offense that Aaron Rodgers is suited to play in. And it's not necessarily that he can't play in it. It just doesn't really fit to the style he likes. We'll see if they make adjustments and, Aaron can make some changes on the fly. But last year, you're looking at a team that was 20th in scoring, 23rd in yards, and 29th in red zone touchdowns. That's not good at all. And we're talking about a team that was also sacked about 9% of the time in dropbacks, which was 29th in the league. So you didn't protect the quarterback, who is going to be running regardless because that's just the scheme you run. He's not running because he's in trouble. He's running because it's a play-action pass, and he has to run on a waggle.
And I want to see if Rodgers could do that.
Exactly. So everything is lining up for, just like you said, this could be a great experiment, and the Steelers could look like geniuses at the end of the year. Or this could all just be mismatched pieces that don't work out. DK Metcalf is going to be fighting people on the sideline. And
probably
your tight ends are going to look good. Freiermuth is probably going to be a top 10 tight end in fantasy this year. I can promise you that. Jonnu Smith definitely will bounce back like he did last year. But in terms of just making this work, I need to see improvement from the offensive line, which I haven't seen you guys really add to at all this season. I have you at about 10 wins this year.
Yeah, I was going back and forth with 10 wins.
I think that's a fair number. You could probably reach as high as 12. I think that's the ceiling for the Steelers right now and a wild card spot. But when you're going against teams like Cincinnati, who granted are going to be taking massive hits on the defensive side this year, and they were already terrible in that last year, and we'll get to that after the break. But you're dealing with teams like the Baltimore Ravens, who are going to most likely beat up on you. And like I said, I expect you to win at home because that's just Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh football is you do not lose at home.
It's going to be defense.
And you have Mike Tomlin. That is your saving grace right there, is the fact that you have the most consistent winning coach in football in Mike Tomlin. That, in my opinion, is the only reason that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to edge out 10 to 12 wins this year and the second place in the AFC North.
Well, we'll take our break and we'll wrap up the AFC North, which I'm sure we don't agree on some of this on the other side right here on the Early Bird Special, ESPN Bakersfield, 12:30 a.m.
101.1 FM.
You were smart.
If you were smart, that's true. This is the Early Bird Special. One last segment before we get to our wrestling recap of the week, and then we'll get to the NFC North on the other side of that to end the show.
And we'll get your text. I see you.
Were we getting blown up for our Pittsburgh Steelers thoughts? Because I know there's a lot of Steeler fans right now listening to me, and they're not happy with me for not taking them first.
We've got a couple of predictions, some wrestling stuff for KG, and we'll get to them.
Well, let's finish off our thoughts on the AFC North. Third place, and again, I say this because just for where they're at and how this defense has looked, and they've not fixed any of it, unfortunately, but we got to go with the Cincinnati Bengals, in my opinion. The Who Dey crowd is not going to be happy. I know they're not, and here's why. You may have had the number one passing offense last year, but that's because you literally did nothing but. We have to remember that they were 31st in rush plays last year, ran the ball 35% of the time, in which they were 93 yards a game, that's 30th in the league, and 4 yards a carry, that's 21st in the league. You have nothing outside of the pass game. And honestly, where you allocated your money this season showed it. Your defense is bottom half in dang near every statistical category.
It'll probably get worse.
And yes, without Trey Hendrick, and here's the thing. You'd have to think that the team with the sack king would be good at sacks, right? Like, at least the one thing that they're good at in the NFL would be sacks. They sack the quarterback 5.6% of the time. That's 26th in the NFL. You're going to lose the sack king, and you're telling me that he's probably all 5% of that.
of the sacks.
And we also hear there's been developments in that area as well, for those of you who are wondering. They do have a deal in place, and it's not the years, it's the money. So it came down to you're not going to pay him the money he wants. So maybe he's asking for an unfair price. Maybe he's not. Personally, you know where my number is for him. $35 million a year. I think that's a fair number. I genuinely do.
I think he gets traded, and it just really depends on what they see the value. I'm sure they want more of the value in trade than they actually are offering in contract talks. But I'm on the same boat. I think the Bengals are the Bengals. I think their offense, they can put up points, and their defense is going to give away a lot of points. But my number one thing is how they start. You know, the Bengals' issue has been starting off slow
every year,
and they begin the season in Cleveland and then the Jaguars. So they are two winnable games, and then they hit the road and they play Minnesota and Denver.
Here's the thing. I think that week one game against Cleveland is going to be all you need to see. I don't think you even need to worry about the Jacksonville game. I think if you come out week one and you get popped in the mouth by a divisional rival like Cleveland, especially like a rough loss like we're used to seeing you do in the first month of the season, oh man, that fan base is not going to be happy. Personally, this is me being nice, I got you guys at 8 wins. I said it yesterday, a team without a defense, I can't warrant giving you more than 7-8 wins. I really can't. Actually, I said 6 yesterday.
Yeah, I was looking at 6 or 7. They won 9 last year, which they were fighting to get a wild card spot, and they missed out. And I think if they start out, 2-2 or even worse, I think it's going to be the same thing or even worse from last year. But to wrap up the North would be Cleveland, which only won 3 games last year. And I think, the number one thing is who's going to be starting. Mm-hmm. And is it going to be a young guy, and they're going to put their trust in the Shadors or, Gabriel, Or are they going to go with, Flacco or Pickett? And really, like we just said, they start the season. They've got some talent on that team.
The Kenny Pickett train now has stalled, obviously, due to the injury, but I hope that they figure this out earlier rather than later, especially for the sakes of some of these rookie quarterbacks. I do not expect to see Shedeur Sanders as the starter in week 1. It's just not how the NFL rolls anymore. And to be honest with you, I think Cleveland would benefit from starting somebody like Joe Flacco for the first couple weeks of the season just to get your guys a little bit of time to realize how quick a competitive NFL defense is. However, we just mentioned it, though. The easiest team for them to go up against in week 1 would be the Cincinnati Bengals.
Exactly.
So maybe you do. And maybe they just say, you know what, Shedeur, go out there and make these guys look silly.
And in that same conversation Schefter had with Pat McAfee yesterday, he was saying, we're all leaning on probably Pickett or Flacco. Pickett's week to week.
Yes.
So all this time he's missing is only hurting him in general.
But, you can't also expect him to go out there and play injured and, win the starting job against a guy who's won a Super Bowl,
but
right?
They also say, if Shedeur or Gabriel go out and start slinging it in preseason, they might just start the season with the rookie.
That's entirely possible. And honestly, last year, you look at where they were offensively, and they were pretty low, right? A vast majority of the games, they were 29th in, I believe, yards given up. And there's just really rough stats across the board offensively for Cleveland last year. And it led to the 3 to 4 wins. Personally, I have them going a little bit higher than 3-4 wins. I got them about 5 to 6. It's not going to be a huge step forward, but I think you're making the necessary steps to make this work. Although it's Cleveland. So Cleveland has been a dumpster fire since I've been alive, and I'm not sure if the ownership really knows what they're doing anymore at this point. The one thing that I think that they're doing well is the secondary. If you really look at the defensive side of the ball, they were great against third downs. They were 6th in the league last year and 3rd in the league in 4th down percentage too.
I think they'll be a better team than last year, and they don't have the Watson thing covering with the clouding in Cleveland. I think having these quarterback opportunities, and they have picked up some talented receivers.
100%.
I think it'll be a whole different type of team in
But
Cleveland.
again, when you had a bottom 5 rush game last year with Nick Chubb as your running back for the vast majority of the season, I know he was hurt for the first half. You had Ford on there too, who did great. There's a lot of questions I have for Cleveland, so I got you at maybe 5 wins. We got to take a break. On the other side, 24 KG will be with us, talk all things wrestling. This is the Early Bird Special on ESPN Bakersfield. Back-to-back liners. It's live radio. This is the Early Bird Special. Thank you to KG for joining us as he always does. There was one question I didn't get to with that entire thing, which was, we're obviously going to be seeing a new member to Seth's group here pretty soon. But I was, going to float that out there, who we thought it was going to be. Personally, there's a couple names that throw out there for me. Ethan Page, obviously. Austin Theory was one that I would also love to see. And then maybe LA Knight. Why not? Last person that Paul Heyman talked to besides Jey Uso before the Seth Rollins injury was LA Knight.
Well, we had several texts regarding wrestling, which I'll save until tomorrow if we don't get to them.
Fair. Let's get down our NFC North picks real quick here, though, just so we can get to those text messages, because I do want to hear from you guys, too. 661-842-2000. Feel free to give your comments on any of our thoughts and our predictions for the AFC and NFC North. I know we have a lot of Steeler fans here in the community that I'm sure are not very happy with the fact that I said that you maybe are going to win 10 games. But then again, a lot of you don't exactly like that Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback this year, so maybe you agree with me. Who knows? But let's get to the NFC North, which, again, is going to be one of the more competitive divisions in football this year, I feel. Last year was any indication. 3 of the teams were bona fide stars. Unfortunately, the Vikings fizzled out at the wrong time, but it ends up happening in the playoffs to the best of us. Personally, my number 1 team here in the NFC North, the team I would expect to win the whole shebang this year in their division, I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. Yes, believe it or not, I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. 12 to 14 wins is where I have them right now. I'm not 100% sure how the offensive is going to look in the pass game, but last year, at least in the rush game, they silently had a top 10 scoring and rush team on the offensive side and a top 5 team on defense in both of those categories as well. They put it together on a defensive side even without a true superstar because Jair Alexander was hurt the vast majority of the season, and obviously they moved on from him, so they feel like they have the pieces necessary to keep this defense going. I just believe that they've kind of made the right moves at wide receiver, picking up a great wide receiver from Texas and Golden, and have really just set up themselves to have a prime year, especially since the Detroit Lions are most likely going to take a step back just because of the coaching losses that they've had. But in my personal opinion, if you're a Packer fan, I think this is the perfect year for your team to step up and be that team. Just to put this into perspective as well, 5 of their losses last year were by 4 points or less. That's not exactly a difficult thing to get over. We saw that a lot the last couple years in the South with the Falcons and the Panthers, who have been able to figure that out lately. It really is just one key drive, one key play at some point in this game. And a lot of the time, I'm not going to lie, it is Jordan, because Jordan is a gunslinger at heart, and he loves to throw. And honestly, that gets him in trouble. He throws interceptions a lot. That is one of their major problems. But if they could figure that out and they could figure out the turnover situation, the Green Bay Packers could be a very formidable Super Bowl contender next year.
I almost second that. I don't think they win the division. I actually have them 3rd in the division.
Really?
I'm going with Detroit. I think with the changeover with coaching, yes, it's going to be a different type of mindset with that team. Obviously, I don't think they win 15 games like they did last season.
No.
But I also think that, they forget that the Lions were battled with injuries all season long, and they were still able to pull out 15 wins. Mm-hmm. And that was just with cut and paste players that, if you watched any of the Jared Goff and the quarterbacks, how they had talked about, this guy just came off the street Thursday and is playing Sunday.
Yep.
I still have too much respect and pride with Dan Campbell, and I think they'll still figure out a way to win the division. I just, having Aiden and a couple of these big pieces in the defense, and I think that offense is just too damn good to look over. I don't think they win 15 games, but I still think they pull out the division.
I have them 2nd. Don't get me wrong. I think Detroit still makes a very hard push for the division. I just feel like the Packers, with what they have right now, what they showed last year against the 4th toughest schedule in the NFL, and now they're going against the 5th toughest schedule this year.
Their schedule looks tough too.
It's just one of those situations where I would expect to see some consistency from this team, and I think that what we saw last year against a really tough schedule proves to me that they are at least able to make it that far. Detroit, though, the only thing that hangs me up about Detroit, because you're right, offensively, they were across the board the 2nd best offense in the NFL. They were right behind the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, they scored more than the Baltimore Ravens, but in terms of yards, they were a little bit behind them, and they were probably one of the most balanced offenses that we've seen. However, that's kind of why I can't really give them that credit this year, because not only is the offensive coordinator gone that led that offense, but so is the defensive coordinator that made the defense look so good with all of the pieces they were missing, and 8 of their assistant coaches. As much as I love Campbell, as much as I would love to say that Dan Campbell is the reason that this team is winning and is doing as good as he is, and he has turned around the culture, I will not deny that. He is not doing that alone. It's much like Dan Quinn with Atlanta did a couple years ago, or a decade ago technically. With Kyle Shanahan there with him, he excelled. He looked great. When you have 2 guys that are capable, if not 3, of being head coaches in the NFL, you're going to look good. And that, I think, is what led to the 15-win season that you got last year. It was a perfect storm. You had 3 head coaches on your team. You had an offense that was absolutely just looking to excel and show everybody how good they were, and they did. You had a defense that did everything they could to stay relevant, and they did. But I just don't know if you're going to be able to do that without the leadership that you had from all of these coaches that were there throughout the season and motivating these guys and making those adjustments. It's going to be
a tough division, and I'll throw in my 2 cents on the Packers. I think you just pretty much circled it. I think Love tries
way too much.
Tries a little bit too much, and I think with a lot of this young talent that they are brought in, I think Jacobs is still a stud at running back, but I think it's going to take them, I would say, a year or two to get just comfortable with each other, and I think Love just trying too much, trying to be that Hall of Fame quarterback. And I also throw in, over this offseason, we've heard everybody and their mother talk about Love being the next Mahomes. And I think we see the reality of Jordan Love this season. I don't think they're going to be a under 500 team. I just don't think that. I think they take a step back. I have them at 3rd, and then I moved up Minnesota at 2, which is another question mark with JJ, but I like JJ. And I like the offense. They've got a stacked offense, and I would kick myself if I didn't mention Flores' defense.
Oh, of course,
is always going to be on top of the league, and that team is going to be tough.
Man, that was the real hard part for me when it came to the second half of this division. Right, is the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. Although I hate having to choose between these two. Personally, I put the Chicago Bears at 3rd. I think the Ben Johnson acquisition coming in, helping Caleb change up this offense. I think with the key additions you made, especially to the offensive line, we're talking about a team in Chicago that was sacked 10% of the time. He was easily the most sacked. This offense looked ugly. They couldn't put up yards at all. I think they were last in the NFL in yards put up at all overall. This is all going to change. This is all going to change drastically. All the things that we talked about with Detroit and how good they looked last year is going to happen with Chicago. It really is, because if you look at what Chicago is built and how they're built, they are very similarly built to what Detroit has. So I think Ben Johnson coming into this is going to literally double the amount of wins that Chicago had last year. Chicago had 5. I have them at 10.
And see, I have them about 7. I think their team is going to be way better. I just think that division is just going to be too tough for the first year with Ben Johnson. But I think we see the uprise on what we're going to see Chicago building in the future.
I think Chicago really just needs to focus on setting up this offense correctly and figuring out a run game, right? I think that is one of the biggest things that they've needed on this offense for a long time, especially to give Caleb some room to work here. Because when you drop back to pass and you expect this kid to complete 70% of his passes, but you're for dropping back to pass 65% of the time, and they know you're going to do that, it's going to be a lot harder for him to be successful. So I think if the offense can get redone and we could figure out the defensive side of the ball, because honestly, they looked good defensively.
That
especially
defense is going to be nasty.
Especially stopping teams from scoring. They were 3rd in the league last year in defensive red zone percentage.
And bringing up Sweat.
Yeah.
And
if you can stop these guys from scoring while simultaneously figure out how to score yourself.
And getting Grady in there.
It's going to be a monstrous year for the Chicago Bears. That's why I have them at 3rd. And unfortunately, that means the Minnesota Vikings are coming in last. I like JJ too. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be bad by any stretch. But I think it's just the unfortunate beneficiary of being in a really tough division. What Sparky was saying about the Chicago Bears, I kind of just feel about the Minnesota Vikings. I think that JJ, although will have the most successful season of all of the sophomore quarterbacks, I feel like that's because no one saw you play your rookie year and no one's got tape on you yet. So the sophomore slump really won't be a problem for him. But at the same time, when you're backed by some of the best wide receivers in football and arguably the best defensive coordinator in football and the best defense, because let's be honest, that Vikings defense is not going to go anywhere. They were number 1 in 4th down percentage, number 2 in 3rd down percentage. They make sure you don't get a first down. I think that's going to be a successful formula for them. I still say they're going to be somewhere around the 9 to 8 win range and probably fight for a wild card spot, but I just can't say that they're going to be more successful than Chicago.
Well, we'll take our final break of the day. We'll get through some of your texts, and tomorrow we'll get into the North, right? No,
tomorrow we'll probably hit the South or the East.
South, and then really Thursday we'll wrap up with the East. And then we got a jam-packed Friday show ahead of SummerSlam. We've got a Money-Wise guy joining us at 7:30. We got our guy over at Dionysus coming in. We'll talk all wrestling pretty much Friday. and we'll sprinkle in some financial wellness in
Maybe
there
I
too.
can convince KG to come in one last time too to give our predictions on what's going to happen on Saturday and Sunday.
Right here on the Early Bird Special.